Well, good morning, Mr. Thornburg, headmaster at Malden Catholic. A very special event today. We're taking and moving ahead in our inaugural Leadership Speaker Series. And before we move on with our program, as always, it's important that we begin with prayer. Today, I'm going to ask two students to come forward to lead us in prayer. Elena Chronopoulos and Ortello Hamilton, please come on up at this time and lead our community. Thank you.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. As believers, we owe our veterans a great debt. It is because of their sacrifice we are free to worship God. We go to church, worship, have Bibles, and serve God without fear of being put into prison or put to death. It is in large part due to the sacrifices of our veterans that we have these freedoms. Let us thank a veteran today and pray for them because they are one of the biggest reasons we are free to worship as we please.
Oh God, we give you praise for these people who have allowed us to serve and worship you in freedom. We do not take for granted that there are millions of Christians around the world afraid of prison or even death because of what they believe. Our veterans are a significant reason why we do not fear, and we thank you for them. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, as I said, today we are beginning on our next step in our leadership journey at Malden Catholic. For over 85 years, Malden Catholic has established itself as a place where leaders are developed and prepared for the future. This past summer, we founded our Center for Student Leadership to provide a more intentional and effective leadership program to both our boys and our girls. We also added the position of the Director for Student Leadership, and we are privileged to have Mrs. Janine Reardon fill that role. This year, we also launched the Ruling Our Experiences leadership program for our 9th grade girls, otherwise known as the ROCKS program. We're currently developing other initiatives for other grade levels and new opportunities such as our summer internship program, which you'll hear more about. Our intention and goal is to provide a leadership journey for each of our students during their time at Malden Catholic. And today is our inaugural Leadership Series speaker. Who do we have to launch this important program? Command Sergeant Major Daniel T. Hendrex. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He assumed responsibilities in early September as the Command Sergeant Major of the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, otherwise known as TRADOC, from Fort Eustis, Virginia. And he's come here with some of his friends, as we'll call them, to provide a presentation for us. TRADOC was created in 1973. It has fundamentally transformed the Army into the best trained, equipped, led, and organized modern land power in the world. It's the shaper of the Army, and one of its functions is to develop adaptive leaders. Each year, 750,000 soldiers and service members are trained through Army schools overseen by TRADOC. I can think of no one better right now to help us kick off our new Malden Catholic Center for Leadership Speaker Series. Command Sergeant Major Hendrex has a seemingly endless story of leadership and a successful leadership journey. Some of our students read the book this past year, A Soldier's Promise, the heroic true story of an American soldier and an Iraqi boy. That book was authored by none other than Command Sergeant Major Hendrex. He served as the Command Sergeant Major in the U.S. Army, CENTCOM, CITF, OIR for Iraq. Command Sergeant Major Hendrex held such prestigious positions as CSM at Fort Hood, Texas, and the CSM in the 3rd Infantry Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia, and a number of other positions of leadership. A native of Norman, Oklahoma, he enlisted in the Army in 1990. In addition to his recent tour in support of Operation Freedom's Sentinel, he deployed to Operations Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Noble Eagle, Intrinsic Action, Joint Forge, Joint Guardian, Restore Hope, Desert Storm, and Desert Shield. You can tell just by that we have a very special individual with us today. He was decorated with the Bronze Star with Valor for his leadership during operations in Al Anbar, Iraq in 2004. The Bronze Star is given to an individual that distinguishes himself or herself by heroic or meritorious achievement or service. He served in the 1st Armored, 3rd Infantry, 24th Infantry, 10th Mountain Divisions, 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, and the Asymmetric Warfare Group, both statewide and overseas. His military and civilian education includes all levels of non-commissioned officer education system and the Tank Master Gunner course. He was selected as one of the first NCOs to serve in a fellowship on the Chief of Staff of the Army's Strategic Studies Group. He has a long list of awards, which include the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, the Bronze Star with Valor, Bronze Star Medal, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Meritorious Service Medal 1 OLC, Joint Service Commendation Medal, Army Commendation Medal, United Nations Medal, the Order of St. George, the Order of St. Maurice, the Order of St. Barbara, and the Aubrey Red Newman Leadership Award. And I'll be honest with you, there's a list about double as long as I just read, which we want to get to, Command Sergeant Major, so I'm just going to let those sit on the page. But I hope you get the point. He's well decorated. It is our distinct pleasure to have him join us here today. As headmaster at Malden Catholic, I want to provide him a warm welcome on behalf of our entire community. Command Sergeant Major, welcome. And I ask you at this time to come forward to address the entire Malden Catholic community. Welcome. Those of us in the crowd here, why don't we give him a round of applause?
Thank you, sir. All right, team, good morning. That was a lot. I think all that really means is just I've been in the Army for a really long time. So thank you. I want to thank Janine Reardon for really kind of setting this up. And it is truly an opportunity for myself and as we just discussed, as my friends. These are young non-commissioned officers that were not that long ago sitting where you were sitting and joined the Army for a multitude of reasons. And so to come here and be able to talk about leadership and discuss that and what it means in real terms, and that you have a program that is focused on it, it's exciting just to be part of that, because it's everything. So as you talk about an Army that is focused on modernization and moving forward and you know, being tasked to fight and win our nation's wars, it all starts with people, individuals within the military. And so that's where we're going to focus a bit on today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, not so much the decorations, but kind of where I come from, because the military is a vast organization. There are a lot of things you can do in it. And before we kind of get into some of my experiences, because I'm in TRADOC, Training and Doctrine Command, we have responsibility, and you'll see Sergeant Hartman, who's currently wearing his drill sergeant hat. So we bring individuals into the Army that have been recruited, that want to do something greater than themselves and serve a higher purpose. And they come in and we get them recruited, and then they ultimately go off the basic training to where they'll meet their drill sergeant and start kind of their pathway, their journey on becoming a soldier in the United States Army. And so it's a great opportunity to be in the current position that I'm in, to really have this discussion on leadership, because at the end of the day, that is what the Army is all about. If you had to boil down the Army to one thing, it is all about those skills, traits, and attributes that are important as individuals So regardless of what kind of piece of equipment you do or what job you're going to do, they represent the best of what the Army has to offer. So with that, so we're just going to talk about my experiences, because my experiences will be different from Sergeant Goldman, from Sergeant Hartman, Sergeant Jones. We all have a little bit different experience. And so as you look at those photos, and in the center, those are organizations I've probably spent 80% of my military career over the last 30 years deploying. Now, why did I join the Army? As you heard, I was from Oklahoma. I had a path set, and my path was I was going to the University of Oklahoma to become an architect. That is what I wanted to do. You were not going to deter me from that, but I wasn't that good at my financial planning. And so coming from humble beginnings, I was like, ooh, kind of ran out of funds trying to get back to school, and saw a commercial, GI Bill and College Fund, that says, hey, you can go join the Army for a couple of years, and then you can get back on your path. So that's what I thought I was going to do. Then I found myself as a brand new private, not much older than some of you here, in the Middle East, in this thing called the Gulf War. And I'm looking around like, how did this happen? This was not my plan. But what's really most interesting about that is why I continued to stay. And I'll tell you, it's the Sergeant Goldman's, Hartman's, and Jones's. It's about leadership. You're going to meet individuals in the military that are no different from you, but they do incredible things. They're inspirational, and over time, you build a camaraderie based on serving this higher purpose for your nation, and it draws you in, and you get addicted to it. And I realized that my original path was not what I wanted to do. And so there's a whole host of things up here that represent 30 years, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about it. But I really want to kind of finish here on one thing, and that's in the center at the bottom. And Janine knows this. All of that, none of that could happen without the support of your family. And so your family can mean different things to different individuals. Could be your grandmother, your mother, your spouse, your children. And it was one of those things that allows you to go out and do this thing and serve the nation. And it really comes back down that I have a daughter that's the same age as you. She's 15. She's right now a sophomore. And she is living the dream of going to school online. Not a fan. I have a 10-year-old son who is he's kind of going to school online. I don't know if I would call that going to school. One of the hardest things you'll ever have to do is control a 10-year-old while he's trying to get educated online. But it's your family at the end of the day, trying to balance your mission, your job, and your family is it's what makes all this happen. You can't do it without the family. And then the last thing I'll really talk about on the slide is probably this photograph right here. Seems pretty unassuming, but this has been, after 30 years of service, one of the craziest years I've ever kind of had. You're in it too, as we sit here in this room, as you're wearing masks under the framework of COVID mitigation. So my year started off with that green photo. That's actually New Year's Eve, right before 2020 began. And that's when I should have known. I should have known when you have a New Year's Eve like this. That photo is actually in Baghdad, Iraq. We're standing on top of Building 5. We're looking down on the United States Embassy in Baghdad, and it's under attack. 19 Molotov cocktails going over the walls. We're watching a U.S. Embassy get attacked. 30 years of service, I've never witnessed that. That should have been my first indicator that 2020 was going to be different. And it's been different every day since it has taken place. You may know that we, had a tactical ballistic missile attack with Iran, not 30 days after that, wasn't even 30 days, a couple weeks later. And where I thought we were on the precipice of being in a regional, if not global war, and then COVID kind of landed on top of the world. And we've been dealing with that, different mitigation strategies, quarantine, isolation. It's been different. It's changed. A lot of things have changed. And it comes with some stressors that I don't think we really understood, because we are very social beings, no matter what we think and what we want to believe. And so when you quarantine and you isolate and you do things where you're not getting face-to-face interaction, it's going to have some consequences. And so we're kind of all working through that together. No different in the military. So as I kind of told you just a little bit about myself, 30 years of service, deployed. The Army's designed for the away game. Incredibly important to remember. We never want to have this game here on our soil, and it's designed that way. And so I've spent a significant amount of time deployed from the early days, as you heard, of the Gulf War. Spent a lot of time in the mid-90s in Bosnia, Kosovo, and Macedonia, and then it came back to the Middle East. Please don't ask me to tell your fortune, because as a brand new private after the Gulf War, I had made the statement that I would never go back to the Middle East because I wasn't a big fan of the desert. And then I spent probably most of my adult life in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. So I spent quite a bit of time there. And so that's going to be the perspective I'll bring to you. What I want you to do is hear from our non-commissioned officers a little bit about their story. So when we get to the question and answers, both in the webinar and the folks out there online and you here, anything you want to ask about the military, because I'm going to give you a little bit of discussion on that, please feel free to ask that. And so with that, I'm going to start with Staff Sergeant Hartman. If you can come on up here and tell the folks a little bit about your story.
Morning, everybody. I am Staff Sergeant Wayne Hartman, and I am currently at Fort Jackson, South Carolina as a drill sergeant. I'm an infantryman by trade, but the Army told me that you're going to go to Fort Jackson and you're going to train the civilians coming into the Army and turn them into soldiers in a 10-week process. The task of taking these individuals who a week prior had very little understanding about the military, and then within 2 months they are soldiers. They're ready to go to their next unit and go and fight and win the nation's wars. My story was, I was a young man, felt a sense of patriotic duty. I wanted to serve my country. As with Command Sergeant Major Hendrex, I only intended to come in, serve one enlistment, and then get out, use the GI Bill, go to college. The minute I got in, I knew that whole plan was going to change. I stay in for the people. The sense of serving the country is great. I still enjoy serving my country, but that takes a sideline to the main reason I stay in now, which is the people that I encounter, the people to your left and right, the leaders you serve with, and that is why I stay in. I am a father. I'm married. I have 3 children. I have 2 daughters and 1 son. And the opportunities that the Army has given me, given my children, I am currently taking courses to achieve my master's degree. So I still got to use that education that the Army provides. And with the family side, I would say that it is a very unique position to be a military child, and the resiliency that they show from moving and going to a different school, never knowing when you're going to come down on orders, they have taken it in stride. And I'm extremely proud of how resilient the Army makes military children. And just to finish it out with my story, I've been in the Army for 7.5 years. I spent the majority of that time at Fort Bragg, North Carolina in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I will be at Fort Jackson, South Carolina for the next 1 to 2 years. Without further ado, I will bring up Sergeant First Class Jones.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sergeant First Class Jones. I am 29 years old. I have been in the Army for 9 years and 2 days. I am a 25 uniform, which is a signal system support specialist. Basically, anything communications, I work on it as far as fix it and provide communications for the rest of my Army family. I joined the Army in 2011 to get out of an abusive relationship. I was told by my family that the guy that I was dating was no good for me, but of course, everyone goes through those years where you know everything, and that was my time. I knew everything, so what everybody else said didn't matter. I ended up being a teenage mom. When I graduated high school, I was 8 months pregnant with my second child, but I continued to strive, and I graduated high school. After high school, I went into protective custody to try to get away from him. And during that time, I ran into a recruiter after 4 years of being in JROTC in the seats that you're sitting in. And the recruiter convinced me that if I joined the Army, I could get away from this abusive relationship. And that's what I did. While in the Army, as Sergeant Hartman said, my kids, they grew older and they gained resiliency, and they have done really well with moving place to place, although they have no choice. They have done really well with it. I enjoy being in the Army for the people as well, although that's not why I joined. I joined to get out of that abusive relationship. But as time passed in the Army, a lot of my peers sought me out for leadership. And in the Army, you come across good leaders and you come across not so good leaders. I came across several not so good leaders, and I felt like the Army needed me. Therefore, I stayed, and that is why I continue to serve. Um, Day-to-day life in the Army for me currently, I am stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia as the executive admin assistant for the command sergeant major of the post. And basically, I manage her calendar, and the Army has provided me with the ability to adapt to change. So, as I said, my job is to work on communications devices, and that's not what I'm doing right now, but I definitely enjoy my job. I have been deployed once to Afghanistan, and that, besides being a drill sergeant, was the most fun that I've had in the Army. A lot of people think when you deploy, you're just going to go shoot at people and people are going to be shooting at you. But during my deployment, I got to work on communication systems that some people may not see in their years of service in the Army. Devices that the Army has adapted or are going to adapt. Just learning those new devices is basically how I spent my deployment. I went on several missions where I didn't get to see any action, but some people that I was with got to see action, and it was pretty cool just to hear those stories from them. I am currently working on my second bachelor's degree, and I have paid not one penny to go to school. So that is another thing that the Army has provided for me. And I enjoy being in the Army, and I don't look to leave it anytime soon. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Staff Sergeant Tizell D. Goldman Jr. I hail from a small place called Utica, New York, right next to Syracuse University, if any of you have heard of that. College basketball, college football, the Orange Men, that's where I'm from. So my story, why I joined, why I did JRTC in high school. And I thought that the military was a good route for me. So my initial plan was to commission into the Army, serve 4 years doing a ROTC scholarship. Unfortunately, my parents, when I graduated high school, I was only 17, and they didn't allow me to accept the scholarship. So I went the enlisted route. I was homeless for a little bit into college. I had a few jobs, but I just couldn't, simply pay for a dorm room. So I decided to enlist. Why do I continue to serve? Is the people around me, the team that you can build as a leader, the organizations that you are part of, is a dynamic aspect that I have never received as far as being a part of another team or job or position. So I love to mentor. I have an inspiration to develop younger soldiers and to even develop higher leaders in my organization. So does anyone in here by a show of hands like gym class? Okay. Do y'all like sports? Okay. Does anyone have a physical fitness coach that is an individual coach for your performance? You do? Okay. So the Army will train you that. One of my additional duties is a master fitness trainer in my unit. And the Army will send you to a school, master fitness trainer school, to allow you to train and to build on individual performance. So imagine you all go to a school for 8 weeks, and you get into a school where there's a PRT, otherwise known as a physical readiness training program that's built for you all. So that's kind of what I do. I'm a advanced leader course, SGL, which is a small group leader. So basically, NCOs, non-commissioned officers within my CMF, which is a human resources specialist, come to our school, and one of my functions is I have to build a PRT program that's individualized for you all, if you are to come to that course, to do an 8-week training program. So I think it's a great opportunity. As far as physical fitness, that's one of my, I guess, large hobbies that I like to do, but to be able to do it for individuals and individual performance is a great opportunity. And lastly, I always say family is important, and I think for me and my cousins and just my family, I'm the first male to join the United States Army, and to be able to continue to be an impact and an inspiration and motivate them on a daily basis just by what I do each and every day is definitely a humbling experience. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks. All right, so one of the things I would tell you that the word I would use to describe those three is humble, right? When you talk leadership, it is absolutely important to be confident, but not to be cocky. Be very careful of that. Humble. Why do I say humble? So we'll start with Sergeant Hartman. So the Army, as you heard, TRADOC kind of came out of this organization, Continental Army Command, which was really kind of managed the entire Army in the United States. It broke into two organizations, Forces Command and TRADOC. So TRADOC is half of the Army. Sergeant Hartman was this year's non-commissioned officer of the year. He went through a competition. That's what you see some of those photos up there. And out of all of those non-commissioned officers, remember, the Army is 500,000 soldiers. He was the top non-commissioned officer. That is no small feat. You didn't even hear him mention it. And so when I say humble, it's pretty impressive based on what they have already done. So as you heard Sergeant Jones, mother of two, came in for very specific reasons, is staying for other operations. I say mother of two because in 2019, of all the drill sergeants across the entire Army, guess who won that competition? Sergeant Jones, mother of two, right? And you can see her up there in the photos. Wasn't about just filling out tests and paperwork. It was a pretty grueling competition, and she showed the grit that it took to become Drill Sergeant of the Year. And then, as I talk about Sergeant Goldman, kind of hard to describe, but he is an administrative specialist that really focuses on the people, the personnel, and all of the bureaucracy that goes with that. But as you heard him talk, he's on about fitness. It's kind of important to him. He is a rare breed where he is a ranger qualified administrative specialist. That means he has gone to a very tough individual school. And Sergeant Hartman could talk about and explain what it meant, but it is impressive. And he is, I wouldn't say he's one of a kind, but he's definitely a top tier talented non-commissioned officer. So I really wanted you to hear a little bit about them, a little bit about their story, because we're all different. We all come together and serve a greater purpose. And when you start talking about why you stay, it's because you get to work with talented soldiers and individuals like them. The Army. We're briefly going to talk about this, but I get a lot of opportunity to engage the civilian population on the Army. And there are so many myths out there about the Army that I briefly have to talk to them. Now, how many of you have seen these movies? As a matter of fact, I think they're getting ready to come out with Top Gun 2. Have you seen Top Gun? Have you heard about it? Top Gun 2, you know, it's coming out. I forgot that guy's name. He's the main actor. I will not mention it. Just so you know, Top Gun is about the Air Force. It's not the Army. You got Rambo down at the bottom, right? You've kind of seen, I think they're on what, Rambo 34 now? I know there's a lot of them, right? So Tropic Thunder, that was a comedy. It was a farce. And the top, you've got a scene from Full Metal Jacket. There's a whole host of military movies out there. What I would tell you, those movies do one of two things. One, they're absolutely false and incorrect. Or two, they focus on the 1%. And what I mean by the 1%, it's the 1% that usually has to do with a combat scenario that deals with adversity that actually are very true, like Black Hawk Down. And that kind of symbolizes a 1% of what portions of the Army may face. And so when I talk to parents, right, so I got to go to a swearing in, I see 100 young civilians getting ready to go off on their Army journey. I'll turn around and I'll look at the parents. And what do you think I see? They're terrified. They're like, and some were crying, some were concerned, so I had to go and talk to them. And so what did I find out? What do they think is about to happen with their son or daughter who's getting ready to join the military? Look, we have been in persistent conflict for the last 2 decades of global war on terror, counterinsurgency, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. It's been a busy place. But here's what I would tell you. And the reason, you know, I bring other soldiers who have been in 3, 5, 9, 10 years. So Sergeant Hartman, he's deployed overseas for about 3 months. And that's while being in the 82nd Airborne Division, right? Our other 2 are deployed for about 9 months out of a 6 to 9 year career. Not everybody gets PTSD. It doesn't happen. There are folks that need to seek behavioral health, but not everybody gets it. We're not going to put a gun in a young soldier's hand and immediately send you to Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria. Most soldiers probably won't even see a deployment in their first 3 years in if they sign up. Depends on where you go. But again, as you heard, it's about 10% of your time that you will deploy on, right? You don't immediately deploy. They're not amputees. There are soldiers that obviously get injured, but it is not this, you know, and that's what I got from family members when I was talking to them. These are the things that they thought were going to happen to their families. So as you go down, it's you find out that it's not actually the truth of what's going on, and the movies do not represent it very well. And so it's kind of why I wanted to give you a little talking from that, and that when I talk to people about the Army and our experience, I don't really want you to listen to me because I'm kind of a senior leader, and I don't want you to think I'm on talking points. I just bring soldiers and let them tell you their stories. So if you have questions of them, by all means ask. The only requirement I gave them is like, just tell the folks why you like being in the Army, what you do, and that will kind of let people understand what the Army is really about. Okay, so now we're going to shift a little, and I'm going to focus on the 1%, right? And so the 1% was really the first year of Operation Iraqi Freedom, 2003, 2004. But I'll give you context that really those first 2 years of being deployed in the Iraq War. As you can see, the time frame there, where I spent most of my time in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment during OIF 1 was in a place called Al-Unbar. And that, where you see in the far left over there, is about the size of Texas. And so we had a brigade of about 5,000 soldiers to cover an area that was the size of Texas. You see a problem with that? That's a big area to cover for 5,000 folks. And so I basically got kind of maneuvered in different places, and we were trying to understand what insurgency even meant. We could barely spell the word, much less how to deal with a counterinsurgency and how to get after it. So it was very, very early days of what was happening in Iraq. And maybe you remember, you don't, that, they came in and that, we posted the sign that, hey, major combat operations are over. And I think we posted that in like 30 days after going into Iraq. Turned out to be a little bit longer and harder than most people understood. I immediately went back in 2005, 2006 to Nineveh province, was kind of up in the northeast. But you'll find out, and you can kind of see there, that both of those locations are on the border of other countries. And that country was primarily Syria. And as we started to find out about foreign fighters, that became a significant issue and challenge for us. And so this kind of gets back to what they were talking about. When you think about people and you think about being in these arduous conditions, what was unique about it is we, as a cohesive unit, because we had worked together, we had trained together, we had kind of suffered hardship together through physical assessments and PT and kind of building ourselves as a team and training, that it gave us the ability to flex to the mission that we were going to be given. And here's the thing I would tell you: no matter what you come in for, no matter what you get trained for, no matter what your job is, you're going to do something different, right? So what you didn't train for, you may end up shifting, and being able to adapt and be flexible is a critical part of that leadership, that trait that you've got to build in, because you're going to find yourself many, many times not doing what you expect to do. With that, let's just talk about the conditions of Iraq. Sometimes we always think the enemy comes in the form of a foreign fighter, comes in the form of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS. Nope. I would tell you the conditions can be just as challenging. That is a real photo of what we call Shamal coming in with heavy winds and these dust storms that would just come out of nowhere and consume you. You could not see your hand in front of your face. And if you've ever had a dirt sandwich, that's what would happen, because we didn't have masks back then, and you would just eat dirt. You couldn't see anybody. And as Sergeant Jones talked, it's all about communication, and this would just destroy and play havoc. And so the other thing you see here is this little thing called a Camel Spider. I'm not a fan. I'm still not a fan. I'm just going to tell you those things. Out of any kind of creature I saw, probably the most little aggressive thing on the planet. Like, those things have no problem in charging you. They can be, the size of a silver dollar to the size of your hand. And when you run into them in the middle of the night, you've heard grown men scream. It's okay. I may or may not have been one of them. I'm just telling you, those are kind of some of the conditions, and being in the heat where it got up to 115, 120 degrees. And most people don't realize during OF1, there was a heat wave that hit the Middle East. It actually went through Europe first, and then it hit the Middle East. And so when you're inside a vehicle, it could get up to 125, 130 degrees. So the conditions itself played havoc with everything you did. And so with weapons as well, you got to keep them lubricated and oiled. What do you think sand does when you spray oil on something? Right? Has the exact opposite effect. And so those were part of the daily routine that you had to deal with before you ever saw one enemy individual. So as we talked about what we asked soldiers to do, this was an armored cavalry regiment, so tanks and Bradleys, large-scale ground combat operations. So the first week of the Gulf, or the first week of Operation Iraqi Freedom, exactly what we needed to manage that fight. But as it moved into counterinsurgency, how many tanks do you see up there? Right, none. What about Bradleys? None. What we had soldiers doing, and again, you think of Iraq as this, being in the desert. You don't think you're going to be in thick marsh, trudging through water where you're getting trench foot because your feet are getting wet, clearing operations. As you look, there's a whole host of things that we adjusted to deal with the conditions and the enemy that we were facing. And so at this point, I was a young first sergeant. We had an organization of about 100 to 120 soldiers that would get attached to us. And based on the mission set, we didn't have the ability to put tanks in that marsh, right? So you'll see over here, we actually had some riverine operations we did as well. And so we adjusted based on the equipment we had, the missions we were being given, and how you dealt with an insurgency, and really it was counterinsurgency operations. So we learned a lot of things on the fly. And so when you talk about leadership, how do you get somebody to do something that may put their life at risk? Like, I'm not personally, we talk about combat operations, we talk about the adversity of that 1% where you are facing the enemy and under fire. How do you get people to do that? How do you get individuals, organizations to face that fear, that threat? Not easy to do. You do it by leading. You do it by being the first to do it, to lead by your own actions. Don't be a hypocrite. And you do it through trust. And so I'll talk about an individual that I have the utmost respect for and trust. And I would tell you, it probably went beyond trust, because ultimately we ended up to a point where we would have done anything for that officer. And I'll explain to you kind of how that happened. But you build trust by leading from the front, by letting your soldiers know that you're willing to put yourself at risk just as much as they are going to have to put themselves at risk to get the mission done. And as you see, those missions are wide and varied and have nothing to do with tanks. And so some other things that happened. So we were trying to figure out what insurgency was. We were really trying to figure out kind of where this was going. And then we got stationed at a place in Al-Qaim, Al-Anbar. Unbeknownst to us, this was the heart of the insurgency. But remember, we had no clue. We had no clue that this is where the insurgency would grow from. And then we had gotten placed out at a location called Husayba, which was really the crossing point. And why it became critical terrain is that it was the closest city to the Syrian border where foreign fighters could cross over. It's about 100 meters to cross over, and then they are in an Iraqi city, and then they can kind of move from there throughout the rest of Iraq. That is where we got put. That's where we got stationed. And we realized once again that these were positions and locations that we had to kind of figure it out as we went. We had to figure out that you built your own intelligence. You had to figure out who the enemy was. So the enemy wasn't, you know, another foreign country in uniforms. They hid within the population. And it came very hard to understand and separate them from the population. And as you'll see here in that top photo, well, how do you get after that? Well, we controlled the border checkpoint back and forth across from Syria to Iraq. And that's where we really started engaging with the populace, that you had to get to know the people at a personal level and kind of figure out where individuals lied, where they aligned with the previous Ba'athist party that was taken out of power, or did they want to take Iraq in a new direction and form a democracy and make it a better location for them and their family, where they can live in the freedom underneath the new government. And so easier said than done. And as we found out, because we're in the heart of the insurgency and we had foreign fighters pouring across that border, we were a huge target. And so that young kid that you see there, not much younger than many of you sitting here today, kind of came up and talked to my interpreter and said, hey, I want to turn in somebody that is that's attacking U.S. forces. And so I have no interest in talking to a 13, 14-year-old boy who's kind of come to our camp and said, hey, I want to tell you about what's going on. So the interpreter talked to him. What became really interesting about it is he said, hey, First Sergeant, you may want to take a look and you may want to talk to this boy, because everything he just described is where we are receiving the most fire, the most attacks, from mortars to rockets. All of those things that are putting our unit and organization at risk, we're emitting kind of from this one location. And this young boy came in and said he knows exactly who's doing it, where it's at, and where they're keeping their weapons at. So we had him take us there, and he was absolutely correct. We found rockets that had been buried and hidden, Bangalore torpedoes. Ultimately, what we found, that he was a local, that his father had been a major in Saddam Hussein's military and was kind of recruiting foreign fighters to attack the U.S. force that was in Husaybah, and to really be a pipeline for those foreign fighters into the country. And so what did that mean in real terms? Again, they don't stand out. We have no clue, but we did start to gain the trust of the population, and they kind of helped us understand who the foreign fighters were and who the population were, and he became a critical node in that. We had several organizations come down because of what we were doing and how we were doing it, that we were very, very, very successful in identifying foreign fighters, identifying those who used to work for Saddam Hussein, identifying those who were attacking and killing U.S. soldiers. And we went through those missions, and it became one of the very successful tools that we were able to use to counteract the insurgency that was going on. And so, remember, this is in the very beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom, as we were kind of figuring this out. We had about 120 kids all the way out there on the border working through this problem set, and it was challenging to say the least, but it was rewarding, because I would just tell you the actions that he took that day, and he continued to take and help us, you know, separate these foreign fighters from the population. First year of Iraq, was deadly. Matter of fact, the regiment that I told you about that I was in, we had over 50 soldiers that have been killed in action and about another 500 that have been wounded in action. I will personally tell you that the actions that he took in support of our organization of 120 soldiers is the reason we had no casualties. It allowed us to see the enemy that we were facing that was hidden within the population. And over that year, when things really started to heat up, it allowed us to really create operations to take those bad folks off the street, and it minimized the risks to your soldiers. So you can never say your primary mission anywhere is that you're focused on the individual soldier. But I would tell you, as a leader, to be able to bring back the 120 soldiers that I went with from a combat deployment that was as fraught with danger as that was, it is one of those things that I'm the most proud of. I am. And that kid was critical to us doing it. And so that created a bond between us as we were doing these mission sets to be able to bring all your soldiers back under those conditions. A very proud moment for me, and being a first sergeant, kind of the senior non-commissioned officer of this unit in this organization, made me very proud. And it really came down to, again, leadership. None of these folks, to include myself, are what you think of as, the Hollywood version of, do you think we were scared? Absolutely. Like every single one of us, when you're facing potentially your own demise, I don't care who you are, you're going to be scared. But because we had trust, because we believed in each other, because we had created a cohesive team, the group, the unit, the organization was better than the individual. And because we knew we would look after each other, because we knew we were committed to all putting ourselves in harm's way, and ultimately taking that risk to go out and ferret out the enemy, made it less riskier, because we were taking those folks that were attempting to kill U.S. soldiers off the street. And so it was, I would say, in a career of 30 years of service with multiple deployments, it's the thing I'm proudest of, is to be part of that unit, to be part of that organization, and those individuals who are just normal U.S. citizens that became soldiers for different reasons, that excelled under incredibly arduous situations. And so I was very proud to not only have known them, but to be part of what we did and the success that we had, and to bring them all back home. That doesn't always come true. Now with that young boy, we think his mother was killed, potentially his brothers and sisters had gotten moved away. And so we felt a commitment to him as well. And so just as hard as we had fought on the battlefield to do our mission and to get everybody back home, we realized a big part of that was in what this young boy had kind of come to us and helped us understand the people and the operational environment that we were in that border town. So we fought just as hard over the next year to get him out of that situation and to ultimately get him back to the States, to give him an opportunity to future his life, because he had laid his life on the line for all of those soldiers, not only in that picture, but for that company and that organization. And I personally looked at his actions as being critical to being able to bring all our soldiers back home. And so there's another story there to kind of talk a little about him and what he has done and what's happened to him since then. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight into that, and how, if you kind of noticed, All of these things were not what we thought we were going to do when we went over. And that is when you talk about leadership and seeing what challenges put in front of you, where you think you're heading may not be where you're going. And you got to be okay with that. And you're going to build the camaraderie, the friendships, the teamwork that will allow you to overcome any hurdle. The Army is not about one person. It is not. We kind of put them up here from a leadership standpoint, but they are part of a greater organization that really allows us to be successful, because they're not superheroes. We're not. We're just soldiers that have been put together, have gone through great training, and have built trust over time that allows you to do things that seem like they're in that category. Because I'm going to talk about some of those folks, because there are some amazing soldiers when they're in those that I consider my personal mentors and that have helped me along the way, not much unlike my friends here have talked about that. Before I jump to that, is there anything that you guys want to add? Good. Okay. So let's talk about leadership. Leadership comes in all forms, shapes, and sizes. And what I've got is a few photographs up here and some photographs to represent some individuals that for me represented the epitome of leadership, because we all have mentors, we all have individuals that we look up to throughout our career. And for me, these are some of the individuals that I've had the opportunity to work with. And remember, I kind of told you about the 1%, right? Why do we always focus on the soldier, the officer, the non-commissioned officer, the units, the organizations that go through these kind of horrific scenarios and then come out on the other end? Normal, average individuals that have done incredible, above average things. Why? Because leadership on a sunny day, mildly interesting. It's when things get tough. It's when it's the fourth quarter and you're down by 3 touchdowns and you buckle your chin strap and you get the team to still come out and win on the other side. So I don't like using sports analogies, but that's what it's about. It's when you get in a place that is its darkest, and because of all those leadership traits we talk about, you will see individuals that will not only succeed in that, but they will thrive in that, and that it will get an organization to overcome the greatest obstacles and hurdles you will ever see. And you're going to see that in your life, whether it's in a combat operation or it's what's going to happen next. Is it going to be, I'm getting ready to graduate high school under COVID mitigation, and what does that mean as I go forward and try to go to college? You name your obstacle. These are individuals that can overcome almost anything. So I'm going to briefly talk about them. I happen to be in an organization and work with these individuals, and as I kind of looked around and as I was talking to them, I found out some pretty interesting things. And so as you look at the profession of arms in the military, as we talk about leadership, these individuals from a wide variety of locations, Connecticut, Oregon, North Carolina, New York, from all over the US, from all varied backgrounds, ethnicities, urban, rural, every single one of them up there has a completely different story. But why they were the inspirational figures for me is because they were able to pull teams and organizations together and excel under incredibly arduous conditions. Mike Tama, far left. In Afghanistan, he was what we call an acting platoon leader. So he was a non-commissioned officer, a platoon sergeant, but his platoon leader had gotten injured, was moved out, so he took over control of that platoon. And for 3 days in Afghanistan, he fought off about 250 Taliban with 30 folks. They got within about 45 yards of his location, where he ultimately got his platoon out of there and survived that. For his actions, he was awarded the Silver Star from a time, I think it was President Bush. Right down here in the middle, Brendan O'Connor. From the Northeast, Great American, actually came in the Army to be an officer. Didn't like that path, wanted to be a non-commissioned officer and a medic, went Special Forces in Afghanistan as the medic, not the leader of that ODA team, as the medic. They came under attack by the Taliban, about 150 Taliban against 12 individuals. His team leader ends up getting killed. His number 2 ends up getting killed. And as the medic, he got put in charge. Long story short, 12 hours of fighting off 150 Taliban against, at that point, there had been 10 individuals left in his organization. They were able to get out. He received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal in the military, below the Medal of Honor, for his actions that day. And I say that because you never know when conditions are going to change and you're going to be asked to step up. He just wanted to be a medic. He wanted to save lives. And that day, his saving lives took a whole new turn in a leadership role, and he excelled because they had trust in him. He had been with a team, and because there was a bond in that cohesive team that allowed him to do some extraordinary things. Bottom left, you may or may not know, is a guy named Leroy Petrie out of 75th Ranger Regiment. I've gotten to know him over the last 5-6 years, and an amazing story out of Arizona. Received the Medal of Honor for his actions in Afghanistan. One of the greatest individuals that I've kind of run across. Humble. You would never know that he took the actions he took. And so, and the reason I pick these individuals to talk about from a leadership standpoint is because it's the actions that they took when the chips were down, when it was a cloudy, rainy day, when nobody was looking, and they stepped up into these leadership positions to really not only save the lives of their buddies, but really to kind of accomplish and complete that mission so they can move forward. Anthony Pryor, Tony Pryor, upper right, a gorilla of a man from rural Oregon, and you could easily mistake his kind of rural accent for not being very smart, but I would tell you he's what I like to call a redneck genius. Do not underestimate his intelligence or his strength. A beast of a man, and I had the opportunity to work with him. He got separated from his 4-man squad going into a ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what's called a Kalat in Afghanistan, 2 in the morning. As he gets separated, goes into a room. So remember, it's 2 in the morning, so he's got what we call NVGs on. He comes into a room, gets separated, doesn't realize he's by himself. And he's popped into a room where 4 enemy soldiers are standing with weapons. What he doesn't know is right behind him is another individual that uses a board that hits him across the board, hits him across the arm, breaks his arm. Remember I told you he had NVGs on his face? What do you think happened when you get hit upside the head with a board that breaks your clavicle? Those go flying. 2 in the morning, the last thing he saw was 4 individuals in front of him, gets hit from the back, and then that individual jumps on his back. Not to go into the gory details, but there was only one person to walk out of that room that day. and that was Tony Pryor. An amazing individual that I am glad to know personally. I'm glad he's on my team, and has been a great mentor to many, many soldiers as we have gone forward. Now, what you will see is a couple of photos that are of individuals that they are in very special organizations. So special that I can't put their face up here. But what I will tell you is a guy named Mike Pup Cortez jumped into Afghanistan on the very first day of that conflict and worked with Northern Alliance. Ultimately received a Silver Star for his actions, and fought in multiple different conflicts. And again, another great mentor for myself. As we get to the top one, you may have seen that photos from a location called Black Hawk Down. And that photo basically is representative of a guy named Joe Vega. Joe Vega is exactly what you think of when you think of the Hollywood version of a Delta operator. Matter of fact, he's near 60 years old, and he probably looks like he's 30, still chiseled, still just exactly what you would think of when you think of a soldier. And he, you know, was in Somalia as a young non-commissioned officer. He went after Noriega, helped capture him. He was also involved in the capturing of a South American drug lord named Pablo Escobar. He is truly a national asset and probably one of the greatest mentors I have had of what right looks like, and you're always trying to emulate because you have these individuals that are fantastic. And so I kind of identify a little of them. And then the one I really want to talk to you about is Lieutenant, and he probably hates that I do this. He hates that picture. Lieutenant Orlick Wilkins. So this was my lieutenant when we first got to Iraq in OAF-1. We were just talking about it briefly. What's great about Orlick Wilkins? Does that look like the combat veteran guy that's going to take on the Iraqi horde? It's tiny. Matter of fact, some of you are too young, but he reminded me when I first met him of Urkel. Okay, so we kind of know who Urkel is. He was actually a finance major. Had graduated, was working on Wall Street. 9/11 happened, and he tells his buddies that he wants to join the military. He wants to do something. He feels he has a need to serve. What do you think his buddies said? They didn't say anything. They laughed hard at him. They're like, come on. You're like, the Army is not in your wheelhouse. You're a finance guy. Why would you want to go in the Army? And what do you think that did to him? Strengthened his resolve. He joined the Army. Matter of fact, he showed up right before we deployed as my platoon leader. And then he told me his story. Do you think I was super excited? No. Not kind of the combat veteran. He doesn't look, the part. And so I'm incredibly nervous as we're about to take our platoon over to OAF-1. And so here's what I'll tell you. Short version. First enemy contact we had, hand grenade came in, boom, goes off. He gets flown out on Matovac. We think he loses his eye. Unbeknownst to us, it cut his eye, skin had kind of flapped down. They sewed it up. Later that evening, he shows up and he's got a little, cover on his eye, and we're ecstatic because we thought he was seriously wounded. He seemed okay. We're getting ready to go back out on mission, and we're like, hey, sir, you'll be fine. He's like, sorry, I'm the platoon leader. We're going to go out on this mission. I already talked to the commander. Here's what we're doing. Okay. 30 days later, his Humvee gets blown up. The whole front gets taken off. His face gets peppered. Wounded again. Getting ready to go out on mission that night. He gets taken away. He comes back. We're getting ready to go back out on mission that night. What do you think he does? Yep. Hey, sir, I'm ready. Let's go. Here's what we're doing. I've already talked to the boss. This happened 3 times. So think about that. This is one deployment. One kind of made everybody nervous because it seemed like every time he went out somewhere, something happened. But remember those, when you get injured and wounded in combat, that's a Purple Heart. So here's a guy who's 2, 3 Purple Hearts in one deployment. That's a lot. But every single time that happened to him, got up, dusted himself off, ready to go back out. And he showed that platoon every time that he would put himself at risk, just like he was asking you to accept those risks over and over and over. What do you think that did for the 20 individuals in his platoon? Trust. Do you think we trusted him? Absolutely, we trusted him. Why? Because we knew he was willing to risk his own life as much as he would risk his. He would always fight for the platoon. He knew how to do it. I never heard him lose his temper. He was calm and collected, even in the most hectic of situations. And this is all from a guy who is a finance specialist on Wall Street. By the time we were done with that year, I not only had trust in that individual, there was love. There was nothing we would not do for him because he was so committed. And I tell you this story because what I think's great about him is don't ever judge a book by its cover. Don't think that you got to be, the gorilla of a man to be a great leader, a great individual, somebody that leads others in the heat of combat. They come in all shapes and sizes and colors. Don't ever forget that. No matter what you're doing, I finish with him because I could not have been more wrong. I had misjudged him. I had even apologized to him, and I was happy to know him. I consider him a friend, and more importantly, he's been one of the greatest leadership examples of a whole host of talented folks and individuals that I look up to and find inspirational. I put him at the top. So with that, as you see this, all of those individuals, I got to interview them because they all receive silver stars or higher for their actions in combat. And more importantly, I kind of talked to them about what they did. And then I asked them, hey, what's important as being a leader? What's important your very first day in the military to the day you get out? And so this old piece of paper I've kind of had for almost a decade now. I should probably laminate it. It's falling apart. And I've taken it on my last 4 deployments. This is what they said was important between those 6 individuals. And between those 6 individuals, 5 silver stars, 1 Medal of Honor, and 1 Distinguished Service Cross. These are the highest awards you'll ever receive in the military for valor under some of the most arduous situations. And I just briefly hit kind of things that are important to you, no matter where you're at, what you're doing. Listen up, you're going to fail. It's okay. Get up, dust yourself off, and do it again. Matter of fact, you're going to enjoy, not when it happens, you're going to enjoy those failures a lot more than you ever will your successes, because that is what is really going to teach you who you are. I have failed miserably multiple times. That's not what's important. Don't laugh. What's important is that you're willing to get up after the fact and go back at it. We talked about it over and over and over again. You got to build trust, and you do that by not being a hypocrite. Leading from the front. Do whatever you're asking others to do. They got to know you're willing to do it as well. Focus on the things that matter. We kind of talked a bit about it, fitness and training, but what I will hit you here, because we haven't talked about it, and I want to make sure you understand it, is guess what? There are no atheists in foxholes. Here's what I mean about that. I don't care who you are. When you get in these scenarios and you feel that your life is at risk, you will become spiritual, religious, and I was no different. There is a component to this that is very spiritual, that everybody has their own religion that they go to in these darkest of times. And I would tell you, everyone, every single one of those individuals I put up there, to include myself, comes across that. And that is a huge component of what allows you to go forward. Be honest in everything you do. Grow to hate liars. They say this because that is a critical component of leading individuals. If they don't trust you, if they know you're not being honest with them, do you think they're going to do the things you're telling them to do? Absolutely not. And it goes back to that trust that you have to kind of focus on that. And then really, I'll just finish with, hey, look, this may not be the mission set you thought you were going to do. This may not be the path and direction you went. But you got to take responsibility of what's going on in your life. You got to take action. You got to take charge. You are the individual that's going to make it happen. And it starts with your first step. So I'm going to finish there. And then we're going to kind of open it up for questions. And I think we know where the first questions come from. I won't put you on the spot like that. Okay. I'm going to stop there. Do we have any questions? I don't know if we've got some in the outside, but if you would like to go first, we're ready. And just so you know, I'm a little older, so if you could speak up. How was Oprah? So the question was, how was Oprah when I met her? So I said, no questions were off limits. Oprah's awesome. Look, I don't know. Like when you meet Oprah, it's one of those things you never expect to do. And then you're sitting in there, but I would tell you, so when we did the show, and we got to meet Oprah, and I'll flip back through real quick. I think some of you see the picture here, with Oprah. And so it was a great opportunity. I took as many soldiers as they would let us today. We took their families because look, you're getting to meet Oprah. And so she's just like she comes off. She's genuine, she's warm, she's personable. Although I will tell you, it was a little awkward when she's like, hey, it gets really hot over there. Like, how do you deal with the heat? You know, how do your clothes stick to you? And then we started talking about wearing underwear in the desert with Oprah. And so that was a little awkward, but it's Oprah. You're going to answer the questions she asked. So, but no, it was great. It was, she was gracious, and everything that you would expect, and that you kind of see her persona on TV, behind the scenes, it was no different. Okay, great question, by the way. Okay, go ahead.
If you could go back in time and tell your younger self to do something better, what age would you pick? What would you tell them?
Wow. I'm just going to tell you personally, I hate that question because it actually makes me think. But what I would tell you, that's what this is. So when we talk about what's important, right? That's what I love about this document. That's why this document is in so many pieces. And I'm going to share this document with you. I'm going to give you guys each one so you'll see what's written on it. And that's why I pull it out everywhere I go. And it is the things that are important to you at every echelon of being in the military that has a lesson in here that has helped me be successful, that if it's my first day in the military, this resonates. If it's kind of where I'm at now, in the fourth quarter of my game of being in the military, it's just as powerful today. And some of those lessons, they're right here. They are critical to you from day one all the way to when you get out. No matter if you get out of the Army as a young specialist, and there are also things I suspect I will take into my my second career once I figure out what I want to do with my life and get out of the Army. Awesome. Okay. Yes, ma'am. So you,
Can you repeat the question?
yes, I apologize. Okay. So, and your name was? So Emma asked that I had focused on adaptability and flexibility, and how do you kind of train to get at that, to create that within yourself, your unit, and your organization. So there are two ways that you learn. Guess what they are? You learn with repetition, sets and repetition, over and over and over again, or through a significant traumatic event. Now, in high school, significant traumatic event could me be having a discussion with my son on a bad test. That could be very traumatic for him, where he will adjust his pattern. But what we want to focus on is we want you to learn by reps and sets, doing it over and over and over till it becomes second nature to you. You know, it's almost like Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. What does it take to become an expert? No matter what your profession is or what line you're doing. And once you build that in, and once you get comfortable with the basics, now, because it's second nature, you want to be able to adjust from that to whatever gets put in front of you. And so those are the two ways we focus on in the military, how you build that kind of resiliency in, that adaptability, that flexibility. And as a leader, I'm going to give you tough problems all the time, right? Why do you think I'm going to do that for you? Because I want to build you to be okay with, we thought we were going to do this, and then you just hung a left at Albuquerque, right? And so we do that on purpose because it helps you deal with the adversity when it pops up. Because in the Army, remember, the enemy always gets a vote. Always. So you can have the best plan and you've done all this great training and you're ready to execute, but the enemy gets a vote. And who's the enemy? The enemy could be the weather. The enemy could be those little spiders, right? The enemy could be your operational environment, or the enemy could actually be the adversary that you're there to face. So they get a vote in whatever you're going to do. And so understanding the basics first and being really drilled in that kind of category is what allows you to adjust, to be flexible. Great question. Okay. All right. We have a question from the webinar. So the two questions from the webinar is, how long have I been in the military? And did the Camel Spider scare Sergeant Jones? So we're going to talk about Sergeant Jones, not Sergeant Major Hendrex. No, I'm just kidding. So I've been in the military for 30 years. And so it is amazing, one, because I can remember my first day going through basic training, and I don't know if you guys can see it, but he's got what we call the brown round. It's that hat that is directly associated with drill sergeants. And I remember that thing, and it still gives me shivers. I remember that like it was yesterday. And then in a blink of the eye, all of a sudden, you've been in for 30 years of service, and you're the old guy on the block. It's been fantastic. I would not have traded my military career for anything. So like you asked a question, if I could go back, and I could go back and become an architect and finish up schooling with the University of Oklahoma, and would you? Absolutely not. I wouldn't change a thing. I met my wife. We have two incredible kids. I would never change that. And so it's been 30 years, and I'm proud to serve because I get to meet individuals like the individuals I brought. Okay, so one, that thing's actually not a spider. It's actually part of the scorpion family, as we talk about that little creature. I hate those things. There's no way around it. I don't care who you are. The problem is you don't really see them in the daytime. You see them at night. And actually the greatest story I'll ever tell with one of these things, and they can get pretty big, and it's about one of my staff sergeant Gil. He's walking, and it's the middle of the night, and he's got what we call a chem light, and he's kind of using that because you can't use a normal flashlight because you're in a deployment scenario. And so he's walking, he's got this little chem light to the ground so he can see where he's going, and it's super dark. You can't really see anything. Guess what he runs into? One of these. Now, being the great soldier that he is, what do you think he did? Immediately, he took action, right? Took responsibility for it, and then smashed that thing into the dirt. He's all excited. He did the right thing. And so he removes his foot, can't see anything, and he gets down, he bends down, and he gets a chem light that's kind of putting a glow on this thing. What do you think happens? That thing jumps up out of the dirt onto the chem light, and I can't even make the sound. I can't describe what we heard that evening in the loudness of, like, we thought he had just been killed. We thought he was getting murdered. You may remember the old scream from Howard Dean back in the, like, it was just one of these things that you can't ever replicate because it was out of pure fear. So I'll tell that story about him, but I've had my own run-ins with that little spider. And so if I never see them again, it will be too soon. So, okay, awesome. Any other questions? Okay. How you doing, Ashley? Good, great to see you again.
So you talked a lot about trust as well as Camel Spider, but were there any experiences such as like running into Camel Spiders or like little things that really help build trust?
It's interesting, the little things that build trust is consistency over time, right? And so when you are, doesn't matter if you're a subordinate, right? So if you're brand new coming into the military, if you're dealing with your peers, or if you're dealing with those folks that are in charge of you or have more rank, consistent in your actions. That's the first thing that over time. So when we get into things, you know, in the military, physical fitness is the cornerstone of being a soldier. From that, we build everything else. It is the kind of the key building block of being a soldier in the Army. And so as you build trust, one of the greatest things to build trust is shared hardship, right? And so as a unit and organization, you can go to the field, right? We were driving up here, and I think it looked like we saw snow against a fence, right? So being out in the field for 30 days in a snow-covered environment, that will build shared hardship, right? So you're not sitting around a nice fire inside, dealing with the elements, dealing with rain, doing a physical fitness event where you all struggle through a tough scenario, and as a unit or organization, you realize you can come out on the other end and be successful as a unit, as an organization. It's those little things over time that build trust, and then the consistency in your behavior and your actions. So if you show up to work every single day and you're always 15 minutes early, you're in the right uniform and you're ready to go and you're prepared for the day, 9 months from now, if you don't show up 15 minutes early, what am I thinking? Right? I think something's going on because Ashley is always on time, right? Ashley is always prepared. And so trust comes with building those reps and sets over time, and that really allows you to kind of come together as an organization, as a team. So, okay. All right, so with that, I will just tell you, and I'll finish up with this. And I put some photos up here that just kind of represent some of the individuals I've had the opportunity to meet and be part of those teams and those organizations. The upper right, a couple of our wounded soldiers in Afghanistan, myself and the division commander talking to them. Remember we talked about how do you build trust? The shared hardships was a physical fitness event we did, and that was the team. We took second place. Yes, I know, second place is the first loser, but we took second place out of 50 teams, so we were pretty proud. And then JP Lane down here at the bottom, just a young soldier that has gone through one of the toughest scenarios I've ever seen. Double amputee, died on the operating table 3 separate times, and has got an amazing story and resiliency that will make a crowd get inspired. And I am just fortunate enough to know him and his wife, Crystal. Just great people. And so this is my tribe. This is my squad. This is why I continue to serve. And sir, I'll say with that, it's been an honor to talk to you today, and look forward to continuing this discussion in our next meeting. So thank you.
I want to thank Command Sergeant Major Hendrex and the individuals he brought with him for sharing their time with us today. I hate to end our time because I'm just very enthralled in all the stories and the experience, and you're probably like me, just reflecting on the lessons of leadership and the stories that are so inspirational. This is concluding our first inaugural leadership speaker series. It being the month of November and Veterans Day coming up, it is right and appropriate that we opened with representatives from our armed forces from the Army. And I want to take a minute just to thank them for being here today. I want to thank them for our service to our country and how proud we are to have all of you at Malden Catholic. We know the sacrifices you've made, the leadership you've provided enables us to have our school in our country and be able to make the choices and have the freedom that we enjoy. So thank you so much for that. I will part one thing I've heard to you, Command Sergeant Major. You mentioned second place as being the first loser. Someone the other day told me second place is really the first non-winner. So you can reclassify that and take that out of there. So take that for what it's worth. I want to thank our entire Malden Catholic community for joining us today. And just go on. I think next we have Principal Redmond in our schedule, academic enrichment. Is that what's coming up next for everyone at home? Can you remind me? After lunch. Okay, thank you. Yes, so after lunch. So thank you so much for joining us. Wish you the best the rest of the day. Thank you again, Command Sergeant Major Hendrex. Have a wonderful day.